You're listening to a Rev FM production podcast. Welcome to Pastors Live, the show that discusses things of the Bible and current events for people who love to laugh. And now, the hosts who answer questions with more questions. It's Pastors Dave, Ty, Shane, and the other guy.
It's Wednesday.
It is Wednesday. It feels like a Wednesday. Does it feel like a Wednesday to you?
Feels like a good day to go to church.
It does. Feels like a really good day to go to church. We're in Exodus tonight. We encourage you guys come out and check it out. It's going to be a great time. Shane's in the studio today with me. So Shane, it's good to see you.
God bless you, brothers.
Yeah, I missed you while I was gone. So
missed you too,
man. And it's good to see you. It's nice to have you back in the studio. We also have Gary Austin. He's with us today, and we're really sad. So. I had a couple guys from the Calvary Bible Institute come up, and one of them was actually named Simeon, and I felt really bad. We didn't get him actually into the studio. There was a real person named Simeon, so James hasn't lost his mind or nothing. So I just thought that was funny. I just felt bad, but because our chairs are a little empty today.
It is.
And so Shane and I get to talk about all kinds of fun stuff. But today is Ash Wednesday. And for those of you who don't know, it's the 6 weeks before Easter Sunday. And it's a day of fasting and sacrifice and prayer. And Shane, we talk about fasting and the need to fast and pray. And but it's also, do you guys know the kind of the history of where the ashes come from? Do you know where that comes from?
I know that they come from the palm branches from the Palm Sunday from the year before. So they burn those, and those are the
ashes that they use
for the next.
And so
year.
it's kind of this. So they dry them out, they burn them, they store the ashes, and then they do that. And so if you happen to be watching the news today, or if you're watching the news, or if you're kind of out and you're checking things out, and you see people today that have ash on their head, that means they're starting that process of the 40 days leading up to Easter Sunday. And so just what's going on around you, because every once in a while you see that in the news.
And you're like, what's that?
Right? Yeah, because somebody's gone in and they've gone in and they put a cross on in ash on their forehead, and they leave it for the day,
right?
Because it's part of just honoring God and putting aside and saying, hey, I'm going to fast today. I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to prepare myself, and it's called Lent, and we used to joke around to say, I gave up religion for Lent. We used to joke around, we used to say all kinds of things, but the idea of giving something up for Lent is kind of the idea of fasting and saying, hey, maybe I'm gonna give up my phone. I'm not going to be using my phone, or I'm going to give up my gaming, or I'm going to give up all sugar. I'm going to give up caffeine, or I'm going to give up things for Lent.
Yeah.
And so Shane, when you think about fasting, you think about praying. I mean, what goes through your mind when you think about those kind of things, and how do you process that? Because obviously we don't necessarily, as Water Springs Church, we don't necessarily follow that liturgical calendar. We don't necessarily do that, but there's a lot of our listeners that do. So God bless you for those of you who do. But like for us, we still want to fast and pray. We still want to be in this place. But for us, how do you process some of that when you think about fasting and praying? And Gary, I mean, what do you guys think? How do you guys process some of that?
Well, I love what is on the description, how it is linked to illustrate kind of Christ's 40-day and 40-night fast in the gospel, right? I like how there's a link there. And to me, when I think about fasting, right, everybody fasts differently, and how you fast is how you fast, right? It's not my job to judge anybody how they fast. That's not our place. And at the end of the day, when I think of fasting, I think of sacrifice, right? So what does David say? Hey, I'm not going to give to the Lord something that doesn't cost me anything, right? So when we enter into an attitude of fasting, whatever that is, I would encourage, make sure it's a sacrifice, right? Make sure it's something that costs you, right? I like how the Bible describes fasts, because everybody loves food, and it costs us when we sacrifice food, right? When we get to realize that hangry is a thing.
Yeah.
And
Right.
our flesh crawls back up, right?
Oh man.
Right. When we're presented with that reality, it's if you're honoring the Lord and seeking the Lord in that time, you can have profound moments of intimacy with the Lord. So that's kind of my take on it, is just make sure whatever it is that it costs you, and make sure if you are going to do a food fast that you are aware of how to do it. You don't want to be reckless and just not eat for 30 days or whatever, especially if you haven't been used to fasting. That can be damaging to your body, so be smart about it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I like that, Shane, that the word intimacy with the Lord, because I discovered that fasting, for example, in food, fasting from food and not being in prayer or communicating with the Lord is just starving.
That's a good way to put it, man. You're exactly right. That's wisdom from Gary right there.
The point of fasting is that sacrifice and being in relationship with Christ.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's hilarious.
That's good.
But yeah, that's a good point. If you're not eating and you're not spending time with the Lord, that's just starving. Yeah, you're just starving. Yeah.
Because man doesn't survive on bread alone, right? But every word that comes out of the mouth of God, right?
Right,
yeah.
So that's kind of the significance where you're like, hey, I'm denying the worldly stuff and I'm really focusing in on filling up spiritually.
Yeah,
Right.
there you
Yeah.
go.
I'm focusing on the Lord. I think that's really, really important. And it's interesting because today is Ash Wednesday, but on this day in 2004, this is when the Passion of the Christ opened in
Wow.
the United States.
Wow, that's
So
cool.
if you think about that, that's 20 years ago.
Oh my goodness, man.
All right, let's just let that sink in for a minute. It's 20 years ago that the Passion of the Christ came out.
That's crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
And that radically changed and you know what? And Mel Gibson and those guys, they really, really tried to push that envelope. But I remember going to the theater, right? And of course, it's like watching a foreign film because it's an old Aramaic, right? And so you're watching all these subtitles. But one of my favorite things was when he stepped on the snake in the garden. I was like, yeah.
True.
I was like,
Crush that head.
As I know.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, Genesis 3:15. But I found it really interesting when I was watching The Passion of the Christ, because I'm like, man, how many dramatic falls are we going to have here? And it took me a minute, and I was sitting next to another pastor, and he pointed out, he says, those are the 7 stations of the cross. And it's very, very Catholic.
Yep.
And it is not a problem. But if you go into a Catholic church, or even you go into Episcopal church and stuff, and you see the stained glass windows, you'll usually notice the stained glass windows. There's usually 7 of them, one in the center. And they're what? They're the stations of the cross. And it's like,
I love stained glass.
I know it is.
Yeah.
It's so pretty, right? It's beautiful.
I do
Stained glass
too.
windows are so gorgeous, and so like, man, this is really, really impressive. This is really, really cool. And I learned a lot by watching that, and I always felt like there was just, when they're just beating him and they're flogging Jesus. I think sometimes we forget how much Jesus went through in his humanity. To die for us so we can know Christ eternally. And we forget that. And I think
That's a good
sometimes
way to
to
put
put ourselves aside and put our flesh aside and say, hey, you know what? I'm good with just no more nor flesh. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to accept that. Hey, I need to put my flesh aside. I need to put myself aside and spend time with Jesus who died for me. You know what? This is that time of year right now to say, hey, let's fast, let's pray, and let's go to some simplicity of life and really, put those things away and really celebrate what Christ did for us on the cross.
Yeah, there's this cool. I've had a couple moments fasting before where you're ministered to. The Lord just ministers to your heart, and when we're intentional with it, like Gary was saying, I think that going into it, it's okay to have. I don't know if this is the right word, but like an agenda, like, hey, Lord, I'm fasting because I want to seek you in this manner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Where it's like, Lord, I need help in this area. So I'm going to deny myself, deny my flesh, and I'm going to just seek you, pray. Lord, would you reveal yourself to me in that area, right?
Yeah.
And he does. It's awesome.
really does.
I've had experiences with it, and I would encourage people, be bold with your prayers because that's faith, right?
Right.
Good
You
word.
want to be bold in your relationship with God. I love how Paul writes in Romans chapter 8, man, where he says, Abba, Father. That's our spirit crying out to our dad, right? And so have that attitude in your prayer and fasting. And if you see someone with some ash on their forehead, maybe ask them how they're doing. Hey, what's going on? And that could open up a great conversation.
Absolutely.
Of encouragement.
Yeah, I think so. And by the way, speaking of great encouragement, I don't know if you guys are aware that on this day it was 1940. If you guys now just going back a little bit farther, it's thinking about some things. Did you guys know that a National Hockey League game was televised for the first time?
I did not.
No, I
that's
didn't.
crazy.
Yeah, so it was in March. By the way, are you guys hockey fans? I'm just curious because I know we've got hockey going on in Idaho Falls now, and so like
We do. I enjoy hockey.
Do you
Yeah.
enjoy hockey?
Yeah.
Do you enjoy a good hockey game?
Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Shane? Do you like
I
hockey?
thoroughly enjoy going to hockey games. I'm not a big I'm never gonna watch it on TV if that
No.
makes sense.
Right.
My buddy in college and in high school, he was on the hockey team, and I just loved going to their games. Like even high school hockey is it's awesome. It's awesome to watch in person.
Okay, so you guys are in-person hockey. Not gonna watch.
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah,
You're saying
in person.
Yeah.
It's-
like this year, one of my goals is I didn't go last year to the Spud Kings. I want to go once.
Yeah,
this year.
they're fun.
So to me, I don't know. I'm not saying I'm not a fan. I'm just saying I'm like look, unless there's because I don't mind a 2-man body check. I'm like, yeah. That hurts. I mean,
Yeah.
you watch, and every once in a while, you got a hockey game when the glass breaks.
Yeah.
And you're like,
fights come out.
ooh, I
Real
like.
deal.
But again, it's like, why am I just here for the violence, or am I actually here for the nuance of the sport?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's for me. I'm like, this sometimes it seems like it just gets really, really like violent.
Yeah, it can be 100%,
And so,
especially if you're Canada versus U.S. right now.
Well, yeah. Well,
If you know, you know.
Yeah,
but,
if you know, you know. That was
Wow.
but
That was good.
I like it because it's kind of like soccer on ice, and like
soccer's not that violent.
it can be depending on
No. They're just feigning injuries. Oh no.
if there's blood in the water though, there'll be some sliding kicks and some plays that are pretty brutal. Especially in the championships.
Okay. First of all, that's water polo. Water polo, which is the version. It's okay. So basically, what we have is we have soccer on grass, we have soccer in water, and we have soccer on ice.
Soccer is an amazing game.
Soccer is an amazing game. Yeah, so 100%. Soccer
The
is an
next
amazing
one's
game.
going to be soccer in air. If you know what that is, I don't know what it is, but if you know a sport that's soccer in the air,
Is that basketball?
email us. I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I
You're
just
still
say,
on the ground. I guess the ball's in the air, but I mean like the people in the air.
Oh, okay.
Is there
Well,
some
isn't
sort
that-
of like flight school game?
Isn't that what wasn't that in Harry Potter? Isn't that?
Yeah,
what
that's that game.
Yeah, Quidditch?
Absolutely.
Was that? Is
yeah,
that,
that
is
thing.
Is it? Yeah. Right now, everybody's freaking out. Oh no!
They listen.
Yeah,
they
yeah,
watch
so-
Harry Potter.
Okay,
Ah.
so
I don't.
yeah.
I'm just aware.
Yeah,
I'm a
aware.
youth pastor.
So here's an interesting thing about that. I remember when. Do you guys remember when Harry Potter came out and everybody was losing their minds? Right.
Yes.
Right. So here's the thing that I mentioned to somebody. I said, it's a story. It's entertainment. It's a story. It's a film. Oh, it's gateway. I said, oh, hold on a second. If you don't want your kids to watch it,
Cool.
don't let them watch it. Right. But the issue is, I think sometimes we forget that entertainment is just entertainment. It's just that. And so this leads me to a conversation to have about The Chosen, because I have a lot of people ask me about The Chosen all the time. I was at the wedding, Shane, that I went to.
Right.
I was around a bunch of actors, and things like that because of everybody's relationships. So I was around people who, a whole bunch of people worked at the Excalibur, which was a lot of fun.
Nice.
That was kind of fun, talking to them and stuff. But it's the interesting thing about, you're like, okay, what's going on with The Chosen? And I want to encourage people. you get your theology from reading the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, keeping its big context in mind. Don't get your theology from TV. Like I can't get theology from the Passion of the Christ. I would not get my theology from the Passion of the Christ, because I have to remember it's telling the story,
it's entertainment.
But it's still entertainment. It was brutal entertainment. It was still entertainment.
And could we say godly? It encourages us in a good way, right?
Right.
It's,
the movie I Can Only Imagine.
Right.
Or, Flywheel.
Sure.
Or Facing the Giants. It's still entertainment with a good and a godly message.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
exactly.
So, but we have to understand the difference between entertainment and biblical truth. And so something like The Chosen is a great example, because I have people come up to me and they ask me about, hey, where is this in the Bible? Where's this thing in the Bible? And I'm like, it's not in the Bible. Well, no, it's in the Bible. You just don't know where it's at, because, I was watching The Chosen. I said, whoa, stop. You can't get your theology from The Chosen. You get your theology from the Bible, because they're filling in some gaps.
He's
to
not
be able
really
to tell,
Jesus.
Right? Yeah,
He's portraying Jesus.
Well, and they're filling in the gaps to tell a compelling story.
Right.
And by the way,
It's good. It's a good story.
they're doing a great job doing that. But the reality is, it's not biblical. It's not all biblical text.
Right.
And they're taking some cultural things and they're adding some cultural stuff around it. And so I think that's something that we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, I love how you say there's a message, right? I was talking to my wife the other day. We were looking for something to watch, and we watched a trailer of, I couldn't tell you what movie. My wife is the queen of trailers, right? So when we sit down to watch a movie, what we really do is just spend 2 hours watching trailers. But it's awesome. And it's fun, right? It's fun. We laugh the whole time. But we were watching a trailer of a movie, and she goes, hey, that looks pretty good. And I said, I don't think so, because the message that, maybe it's good, but the message that I'm getting from the trailer is not very good. And so I don't think I want to watch that one, or if we do watch it, I might turn it off. And I was mentioning, I used to be a youth pastor, right? And one of the things that
It's like a Marine. Once you're a youth pastor, you're always a youth pastor.
Yeah, you always got in your heart, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
One of the things that you capitalize on is like, for instance, the Marvel stuff, right? It was really big when I was in the youth ministry. And what you capitalize is the story that it's portraying. If you watch a movie, there is always a message being. It doesn't matter what it is, there is always a message. And one of the movies that I used to illustrate...
That's how script writing works for all the people who don't know.
Right, absolutely.
There's always a story.
One of the illustrations I was using when we were talking about the Bible and forgiveness and what Christ says, right? So we're in the Bible, but then I can go to Marvel and say, hey, there's this awesome movie scene or whatever in this one movie, and the whole thing was about unforgiveness and bitterness.
Right.
So if you watch Civil War, Marvel Civil War, the whole movie is about what bitterness and unforgiveness does, and at the end is when one of the characters finally realizes this has to stop, and we can't do this, right? And so obviously when you're talking to kids and then you use that as an illustration, they're like, oh, okay, right? So whatever movies you watch, what's the message? Because they're trying to give you a message, and that's the importance of not only for your families, but for yourself. What you're putting in is what you're going to get out, right? And you got to be careful, man, what you're watching. And listen, we all have different liberties, right? That's what Paul says in Corinthians, where each Christian has different liberties, but just make sure that the liberties that we're using are for the sake of Christ and that they're filling us up. And as Pastor Dave taught on Jude, talking about building us up in the faith, right? Is the things that we're doing building us up in the faith. So,
well, yeah, 100%. I think, if you think about, you think we want to talk about unforgiveness. There's some great unforgiveness stuff in the Marvel universe, right?
Yeah,
Some of those things. There are great examples of that, but we have to remember something. It's still entertainment. It's not
all entertainment.
real. It's just entertainment. And even when it's what we would call because there's a big push right now for Christian films, Christian series,
which is cool. But the problem is you can't get your theology from them. You can't. You get your theology, you get your understanding of who God is
from the Bible,
Yes.
not from some, post-apocalyptic show, not from a movie.
Right.
You don't do those things.
Right.
You make sure that you get that. And I remember years ago, you think about, the Jesus film, which was just like, just a gospel.
Right.
That's it. It's just a gospel, right? And you think these are great stories because it's just depicting the life, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, which is the gospel. The gospel message is because that's the big picture. That's why Jesus came to die for us, so we might have eternal life. So
That's it.
And I want to encourage you guys. Hey, listen, trust Jesus if you would with your salvation, and if you want to know more about that, we'd love to hear from you. You can go ahead and email us at pastorslive@therev.fm. You could also reach out to us at the office at watersprings.net. But we would love, if you want to know more about having a relationship with Jesus, the God who died for us and rose again so we might know and have eternal life by faith, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to pray with you and talk with you. But until next time, God bless you, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Later.
You've reached the end of another episode of Pastors Live, a Rev FM production podcast. Thank you for listening. Submit your questions and comments by email to pastorslive@therev.fm. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review from your favorite podcast listening platform. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or Amazon so you don't miss the next episode drop.